good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated, we know we can do better. And this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. I'm here. Really, I am. Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. Had to do a little quick refresh. The connection kind of disappeared. But anyway, welcome. If you are new to this channel, please go ahead and subscribe. It really helps get the word out about our education crisis in America. And that's what I cover here at this channel. Also, like and share this broadcast. This is going to be a big one. It's about school choice. This is a hot button issue right now, especially as we enter into our election season. But let's face it, it's been hot for a long time. And lots of people are talking about it all over the country. My guest today, like all of my guests for these shows, is someone who is trying to improve education, working very hard at that. In fact, she's quite vocal in the state of Texas in particular. Her name is Lynn Davenport. And I asked her to come here because she is very active in Republican politics in Texas. She's been very outspoken, trying to get people to understand what school choice is and is not. And she takes a lot of heat. So she's, my kind of people. Anybody who stands up right now against prevailing narratives and aims to, tell maybe the unpopular truth is somebody I want to hear from. So I asked her to join me today because I get a lot of questions about my quote unquote opposition to school choice, as if I oppose parental rights, which I don't, and neither does Lynn. And I thought that given that she's much closer to the issues from a political standpoint and in a specific state, a big state, Texas, that is a Republican-run state, at least from the governor's office, I think she can speak to a lot of the issues and help clarify for some of you why many of us who are not union members, who are not leftists, who are not Democrats, still have serious concerns and you could say oppose school choice TM. She can help explain that. So without further ado, please help me join me in welcoming Lynn Davenport. Hello, hello.
Hi, Deb. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this.
Your mic is all crackly, I'm noticing.
Oh, no. Okay. I can take it off.
Yeah, maybe take that off because I think it's causing some disruption.
Okay.
See what happens.
Okay. How's that?
I think that's better. Okay, great. Yeah, there was just some kind of interference. Okay. Hopefully there won't be an echo. If you guys are hearing an echo, please let us know. So as I told the audience.
Not today, Satan. Go away. We're going to talk.
Yeah, we're going to talk. So as I told the audience, I asked you to come here because I've been watching you sort of from a distance, but literally geographically, and we haven't really talked directly about this except messages here and there. And what you're doing that I don't do because I'm not really political is you're actually there rolling up your sleeves and getting in there and having the debates. And I was on your Twitter profile listening to you speak recently. And I'm just very impressed with the way you hold your own and you don't let people just like roll over you and accuse you of things that are not true. So maybe if you could just very briefly explain to us, like, what prompted you to get involved in this particular fight in the first place? And then what is, what drives you? What's your passion as far as school choice goes?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always been a conservative. I've always voted as a conservative, but I've never really been entrenched in the Republican Party. I live in an urban setting in Dallas proper. And so I have a Dallas mayor, but my kids are zoned for a district in the north, which is a little bit more suburban-like. And so I've kind of been knee deep in local politics. I did run for school board, and that was 2017. But I wasn't involved in the Republican Party because I didn't really understand the need, I guess. But now that I see that the power really locally is Democrats, no question, Dallas County is run by Democrats. Our major metropolitan cities are run by Democrats, but at the state level, it's Republicans. We have been in power for the last 2 decades, and this all goes back to when George Bush was our governor, and then he became president. So we have to look in the mirror as Republicans, because no bill gets passed or signed without the Republican support. So it's Republican governors that are signing these bad bills. And I see how the bills impact what happens to our schools. So while I fight the school district, I fight all the things that are happening in Richardson ISD where my kids were zoned, I also see that a lot of the problems come down from legislation, not just from the state level, but also the federal level. And so I'm fighting both fronts. And it kind of creates this no man's land where you don't really have a lot of allies in powerful positions. So
What's
the left
your
and the right both kind of don't like me.
what
Although I was just elected to precinct chair in my area, so that's a start.
Yeah, that is. What is your, so I find that when I meet people who don't really feel completely at home in either sort of political party, it's generally because they hold fast to some kind of a principle or maybe a cluster of principles that both are violating and that you refuse to violate. So for you, what would you say is your North Star or the thing that you feel strongly about when it comes to education that the bills are violating, the Republican, government in Austin is violating, the Democrats in Dallas are violating, that everybody's getting wrong and that you refuse to give up on, to compromise, well, I'll give this over and I'll give that up just so we can have something, right? What's yours?
Yeah, and I'm not very good at compromising on things. So I think that it all boils down to I'm a free bird. I don't like, I've always been like this. I don't like people to impose unnecessary rules and regulations and policies on me that make no sense. But I am a rule follower in that when things make sense and they follow God's laws and nature's laws, then of course I'll get behind it. But individual liberties, real freedom and parent empowerment, being able to have informed consent on what happens to me, whether it's medically or academically with my children. I'm just very independent like that. And I've never been much of a joiner or a follower. And at times in my life, that's been, sometimes you feel like, well, am I different? Like, what is that? But then I realize I find the relationships that I have now, I find people who are more like me. And we may not have ever connected in the past based on, how we grew up. But I build these relationships that are so much more authentic than what I may have had in the past, because I mean, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and it's important. I find others who find it important as well.
Well, and then you have more people know what they're getting into. And what I notice about you and even listening to you speak is that you're very open and honest about what you think. There's no fancy language or code words. You say what you mean and you mean what you say. And that's very obvious when I listen to you speak in these debates. When you are having these arguments about school choice, what are some of the things people are saying about you that are simply untrue and that you want to address and say, no, that's not true, and here's what is true?
Well, what I see is what I consider a false dilemma fallacy. This happened a lot during the pandemic, where if you don't want a vaccine or a mask, then you want to kill grandma. So it's, there's no gray area. It's this, is that. So that happens with school choice, is that if you don't support school choice, you must be a Democrat or you must align with the teachers unions. And I went sideways with the teachers unions, which they're not really in Texas. They don't have collective bargaining. I was often at the Capitol testifying for the same things that are against the same things that the teachers were against, because if it's bad for the teachers, it's bad for the students. And we do align in a lot of ways. Now, politically, we don't. But what's happening to teachers is purposeful, and they're doing things to set up the classroom to make it so miserable that we'll be just screaming for technology to replace these unqualified teachers that they're having to hire now because we've got a crisis in the teaching profession. But to go back to what do they call me? A Democrat, and the allies that I'm working with Families Engaged and other organizations. This just happened yesterday. These women mostly, and some men, who are fighting this battle with school choice and with technology and these vendor bills that come in Texas, and these Republican legislators call us Democrats when we call them out. They do not like the public shaming. One of them is a pastor, Steve Toth, and he's blasting us on Twitter and Facebook, and he's lashing out. And I find when they do that, it's rare when they do that, but when they do, you've really hit a nerve and you're way over the target. So you can look at their campaign donations. You can see who, pulls their strings. And it's very obvious. The PACs and the same people who are supporting all of this experimental technology, all of the experimental technologies, like House Bill 1605, which is a massive vendor bill, $2.44 billion. It's the same people supporting school choice. And why? Why is that? It's the same people supporting charter schools. Why? Why is that? The lobby, you're finding they're kind of all coalescing. And so they all get what they want in this collective machine that is working to privatize the public schools. So I won't dispute that we have issues in our public schools. I'll be the first to call them out. I do not make excuses for their behavior, their bad behavior. I've been calling that out since before I ran for school board in 2017. The machine there didn't want me in there. So, I don't make excuses for them. I don't make excuses for the teachers unions, but when we align, and, sometimes the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and the teachers unions happen to be correct on the school choice issue. They are trying to privatize the teaching profession and public.
Another way to look at it is they're trying to get the government into the private sector. It would be another way to look at it, don't you think? Totally. Because ultimately, if they were trying to privatize, then they would not want the government money. They'd actually be trying to, I'm trying to privatize education in America. The teachers unions have a legit gripe with me because I'm an abolitionist. I think the government has absolutely no role to play in educating America's students. I think if we talk about government, it should be very local. Like Dallas wants to put together a school for the students of Dallas, and Dallas wants to raise the funds using a sales tax or using some kind of tax, and Dallas wants to do that. I'm not going to stand in the way. That's up to the voters of Dallas. But I don't think the Constitution permits that. I think we have run ramshod over parental rights since 100 years ago, when they decided that compulsory education was the law of the land, and then it had to be delivered using property taxes. I think this was a conflict of interest from its inception. So I go all the way. I'm an extremist. I make no bones about it. So they're not wrong to say Deb wants to privatize education, because I want the government, I want it to be literally our money and the government not subsidizing. But I still think, so therefore, when you describe what you're doing, I don't think you're guilty of trying to privatize. I feel like you're fighting more of the fight of the, you guys want to get your fingers in the cookie jar. You want to have those vendor contracts and get some of the taxpayer bucket, jar of honey. And we know it's $1 trillion a year now. And if they get school choice, that's probably going to go up, because I believe even in Texas, now you could tell me the details, parents aren't going to just get dollar for dollar the exact pupil expenditure that would have gone to the school, right?
Right.
They're going to get a portion.
No, that actually would, and this is what the Republicans don't understand, that if they support school choice, they actually support literally the growth of government, because the two major bills that emerged from the last session, we had multiple special sessions because the governor was like, no, I'm going to just keep trying until I can cram this down our throats. Well, he didn't get his way. So now he's going after he went after the incumbents and using his war chest for that, rather than making the state more red. He uses it to flip these seats that are already red. So the bully pulpit. But the special session, they had House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1. Well, House Bill 1 was $32 billion, and it was It was layered with vendor opportunities. It was layered with strings, which was the video that you were referencing earlier in this when I was at the state convention, defining what are the strings of school choice. And those are outlined in the bill. So I always ask people, did you read the bill? If you support school choice, so you support the growth of government, $32 billion. Well, I mean, it wasn't a perfect bill. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Or
I hate that phrase.
whatever.
If you know there is a perfect, if you acknowledge with that statement that there's a better way, you're acknowledging it. So now what I want to know is, with the hundreds of millions of dollars you're spending lobbying, why aren't you expelling any air in the direction of the better solution? So I would buy the notion that you understand this is imperfect if you ever acknowledged publicly what the better solution is. And I never see that. I never see them saying what we really should be doing. You said it. You said, well, inconveniently, the Constitution says what it says, and what you really should be doing is rewriting that, the state constitution. But since you're not going to do that, and here we are, I'm going to fight this because this is growth of government. So you actually are the only person I've heard say what the so-called perfect is. They'll say, well, you're making the perfect the enemy of the good. I'm like, the what? The who? Wait, what? So there is a better way? You're acknowledging this is not good?
Yeah.
No, why is it not good? And you just said it. It grows government. Is it not the weirdest thing you've ever heard, Lynn, to hear Republicans talking about creating a new entitlement? Let's face it, that's what it is. They're creating a new entitlement.
It will literally create a new tax, because what people don't understand is those who want to defund and collapse the traditional public schools, they think that this will siphon the money away from public schools into private hands for the vouchers. No. It creates another lane. So right now we have two lanes. So we've got charter schools, public schools. They want to create two more lanes: virtual ed, which didn't pass in the last session, but I guarantee you they're going to bring it back. Virtual ed, and then vouchers. 4 lanes of taxpayer-funded education.
Each one who will be competing. Each one will now have an office, and each one will be competing, and it will become political. They're getting more than I'm getting, and that's not fair. And we have more students than they have, and this is that, and that's that. And they're going to start comparing and contrasting what's effective, what's not effective. And guess who's not figured into this conversation? Who's not even discussed in all of these conversations?
Yeah, us.
The children.
Well,
they're missing from the entire equation. Like, the whole point of improving education was for the kids. And all of these debates, and that's another thing I've heard you do that nobody else is doing, is you're like, hi, remember why we're here? Do you remember the kids? You remember the families? You remember the whole point of education? And it's, I can tell you, audience, as an abolitionist, so I am one of them. I admit it. I am one of the ones that wants to defund public education. And what school choice does is not that. I would side with it if I thought it would do that, but I have a brain and I can do math and I can read a bill. And it's not only not going to do that, it's going to grow it exponentially. Think Obamacare, and you'll be halfway there.
Exactly. And that's what they were basically saying. Let's just pass it and then we'll figure it out. And most of these
guys, we've heard that before.
We heard it. In Pelosi. Well, most of these guys too, and I say they're guys. Now, that's not to say that there aren't women who are behind this, because they have a lot of poster children, like Mandy Drogen, who works for Texas Public Policy Foundation. She's kind of like the Molly Ringwald of school choice, always wears pink, and she always cries on cue when she goes and testifies about those poor kids trapped in failing schools. And I keep saying, why are the schools failing? What has happened decade over decade that has led us to this point? Because most of the people in those rooms were educated in the public schools. What has changed? And so much of that has come down from federal and state legislation, mostly on the right, not the left.
Yeah, No Child Left Behind was and even before that. Okay, so people love to go back to Reagan and say, well, Reagan missed his chance to get rid of the Department of Education. And I'm like, guys, you got to go way back. You got to go way back. Without Republican help, we wouldn't have an income tax. So you've got to go way far back to before, the progressive era, Woodrow Wilson, before that, Teddy Roosevelt. The Education Trust has existed for well over 100 years. They just keep changing the name. They keep changing the name of their project to socially engineer American children. And the proof that it's been successful in spite of how hard we've fought for over a century, is that we have so many parents thinking things like, how will my child get educated without some expert telling me what they need to learn? Like they just can't fathom it. And so, you're there and you're trying to explain these facts to people and explain about the money. And what happens when you point it out to people in black and white and you show it to them, aside from them sort of mocking you and perfect enemy of the good, do you ever get any people going, holy cow, that's a lot? Or conversely, let me justify it to you why it's necessary. What are the usual arguments you're getting back?
Well, if someone takes enough time to be able to hear those points that I make, they come along. And my friend Mary Lowe, she's the founder of Families Engaged, and she and I, we toured the state. We went to grassroots organizations across the state, and we were not giving presentations on school choice, but the question would always come up, and we would explain to them the pitfalls. And when we did that, grassroots understands. They're like, what a tool to impose these things on the, once you accept the money, your private school and your homeschool no longer is private. And once they understand the strings that we outline and we define, then they say, oh, okay, we're not for that. So then you also can present the thing like what you're doing. You said, I'm doing the thing that people say, what's the solution? You're like, I am doing the solution. I'm homeschooling my child. Well, my kids are grown. They're out in college and beyond. But if I had it to do over again today, I would not put them in the public schools. But I still care about what they're learning, how they're learning, who's profiting, where's the money going. I'm a taxpayer. I care about what happens to the children of our future in our communities.
Right.
And so it's important for us to ask those questions. And parents who don't know to ask those questions, that's what we're doing with Families Engaged. We train them on what to look for and how to go up against these awful school boards and train them on grievance hearings. And so that we do have a lot of great tools. We have a lot of laws on the books that help, that if they had any teeth, that would actually be effective. Right. But the legislators, they like to pass a lot of bills, and they're like business deals. They have notches in their belts for, I passed this, and they go back home after they've been in Austin. They go back home and they, boast to the masses don't know what's going on.
Well, let's say we've gotten you school choice, and what bothers me about that is a few things, and I'm sure you've heard this before. Is there's first of all, equating choice to freedom is a false premise. I can go in the grocery store and I can see that there are thousands, literally, of different kinds of crackers and cookies and different things like that, right? But good luck to me finding one that doesn't have soy in it at some place, like, or seed oils or all kinds of, high fructose corn. I mean, now they're labeling it better. But my point is, I have all kinds of choices, but I might actually really only have one or two that offer me freedom from chemicals. I'm just giving an example, an analogy. Yeah. All right. Well, in education, it's fairly similar. And you're seeing it with these 4 new tracks, and, a couple of them are technological. And if your operating belief is the schools are bad because they don't have enough money, school choice doesn't solve that. If your belief is the current schools are bad because they have woke teachers and woke curriculum, the private school, the undercover moms and those people will tell you the private schools, NAIS schools are worse. They're way woker
from our public schools. That's where they get them.
Yeah, exactly. So they're all educated in the same ed schools too. So they're actually farther ahead on some of their woke stuff. And so that's not going to solve your problem. If you think, the public schools are bad because they're violent or they're not safe or et cetera, and you then say, here, we'll give you money, parent, and you can go to another school. What is the mechanism in there to make the safety happen? Do you genuinely believe that safety is a function of money? Or do you think it's policy, procedure, discipline, and things that have really nothing to do with money and have more to do with culture? So my problem is that people keep attaching this notion that it's a rescue plan. Kids in failing schools, you want to trap them in failing schools. Well, who's trapping them there? Government. Because the government monopolizes 99+% of the education market. The money, the teachers, the credentialing process, all the laws, you name it, they run it. right?
And the only thing I'll challenge, because I totally agree with you, is the term monopolizing. And I know why you're using that, because it is monopolizing the
I'm just saying
total
from a
market.
compulsion standpoint of them going, you give it to us first. That's
Yeah,
what I mean.
absolutely. And that's where the bulk of the money goes. But we didn't look at education in terms of market forces until you had Milton Friedman coming into the picture. And that's who, they all bow to the altar of Milton Friedman. And, I hear it all the time. And in fact, this woman who ran for state board trying to unseat a conservative in there, and she was funded by the charter lobby and the school choice lobby and all that and the technology. And she was saying, oh, yeah, once I read Milton Friedman's, economic vision, I was sold back when she was in college. Well, putting that term on the education, that doesn't jibe with me. Think about this. If once we view the children as in the schools as a marketplace, they didn't call it a monopoly. And, of course, they didn't spend like they do today, but they didn't call it that when we were in school. What has changed? And I think one is the cost of living because of the schools. And it's like this vicious cycle. Our school district is in a deficit. They keep spending, they keep driving up our debt. We can't afford to live here. So we're losing students. We've lost 5,000 students. They're having to shutter campuses, and they say, oh, we don't have any money. It's too expensive for people to live. Can't afford to live in our district. I'm like, because of you. Like, they need to look in the mirror. They don't see that they're part of the problem. But I also understand that the way that they fund the schools, they've set it up to where it still puts the burden on the taxpayers. And Texas is unique in that we do have the constitutional mandate that we have to make provision for public free schools and a general diffusion of knowledge. Okay.
All states have that. There's not a state that doesn't have that. Yours might be slightly different around the edges, but they all have one.
Article 7 is different. And I don't know if that's because the way the property taxes are funding our schools, whereas other states.
No, your funding model is probably your own. Every state has a little different funding model, but in terms of every state constitution currently has a provision to provide free and fair, FAPE basically. So they're just written a little differently. Like you'd have to read each one. But my point in saying that simply is that so that the audience understands that when you speak about Texas, while there will be differences here and there, it's not like their state doesn't have a constitutional provision to provide the free and equal and all this kind of stuff education.
Oh, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all I mean.
Yes. Yeah. And then, you'd mentioned before, just going back to Woodrow Wilson. So I go back to LBJ because a lot, and my perspective is, I'm coming just from what I know in Texas.
Sure.
And JFK was shot here in Dallas. LBJ is sworn in at left field. Where is JFK shot? From the book Depository Building. I mean, there's just all these strange things that all roads kind of lead to Texas in education, and so much changed because I grew up, I was born in 71, graduated in 89. So we didn't have standards when I was in school. The standards came in the late 80s, early 90s, the formal standards. How in the world did we get educated without standards? Well, I'm not going to go down all that right now because that's not really what we're talking about. But my point being, we don't need the standards in order to educate a child. You can move through textbooks, and when you forget something, you can circle back, spiral back, whatever the word is, and learn, figure, oh yeah, get a refresher. And then you can move forward, move ahead a little bit to see what's coming. Parents can see that too. If they forget, they can go back and then they can help their children with that. Well, that's not happening. But going back to LBJ, he passed a very bad bill in this 1965 ESE, Elementary and Secondary Education Act. That changed the trajectory of the nation from the federal perspective, which of course you and I know there's no constitutional authority or justification for the U.S. Department of Education having any role in what is supposed to be a local decision.
That's why they tie to money. because their only justification legally to get around there being no constitutional authority to do it is to say, oh, you can say no. Oh, sure, you can say no, but then you won't get this money. And
Right.
who wants to be the governor who says no to a big carrot from the federal government going, oh, you have special needs kids in your state? Yeah, IDEA money, you want it? Oh, title funds, you want them? And I understand that some people in Tennessee, some lawmakers are like, let's study this. Maybe we can do without that money and be more independent. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good way to go. Keep going with that.
Yeah.
But no one wants to do that. No one wants to say no because they don't want to go back to their voters. I don't care what party you're in. And they don't want to say to the voters of their state, I said no to X millions of dollars of money. What if they said no to the COVID relief money just to keep their schools open? What if they said, I'm keeping the schools open. I don't need your relief money. Stuff it where the sun doesn't shine. And we're doing this. They'd be out of office. That'd be it.
No. We constantly just hammer that message that we need to end the federal funds, reject federal funds. We finally have some legislators, and now they're the same ones that are asking for school choice. And there are legislators. There's who was it? Chip Roy, I think.
Yes.
He was trying to push a school choice bill, and then we've got our Texas Senator Ted Cruz. That's all he talks about. And I push back on people. I'm like, if you're pushing for school choice, you're part of the problem. You're the reason why we haven't solved the border crisis. I said this in that.
I heard you. That was great.
Yeah, but because it's true. So they're part of the problem. Anyone who spends any amount of time on school choice, they're part of the problem because that's the thing. That's the only thing the governor cares about. That's the only thing we were focused on at the legislature once the session ended. And during the session, it was a huge part of it, but also the book battle. That was back to the books. So we never got involved in that book. I mean, absolutely. We applaud anybody who's cleaning up nasty books. And of course we have to protect the children, but we didn't get in that. That's not a state. That's not a legislative issue. That's a local issue. So the book thing sucked between that and the vouchers, it sucked all the energy out of the room. No one was paying attention to this massive boondoggle with the ed tech bill, which Laureen Powell Jobs, Steve Jobs' widow, owns this company. She bought Amplify, and you'll see me tweeting about it all the time. I don't ever stop talking about this because it's a massive boondoggle. It shifts money. So it's called Open Education Resources. It shifts the money and the resources away from textbooks to technology. They used a term coined by UNESCO, and all of these Republican legislators, 100%, voted for it. Why? Well, they were told it gives them a parent portal to be able to see what all this woke crap their kids are learning. I'm like, a portal online, which is dynamic, modifiable. That's why they want it to be Open Education Resources, coined by UNESCO. We're Texas. We're, gosh darn independents. We don't let anybody tread on us, and we're all that.
Hitch your wagon to UNESCO. That doesn't seem to align.
Right. And so that's another reason that pastor legislator Steve Toth is calling us Democrats, and he's doubling down on why he voted for this. And then they tickle the ears of the conservatives by saying it has sweet Bible stories in it. They're going to learn the story of Esther, Queen Esther.
Let's back up. Is it the proper role of total strangers in a school that has any ties to the government at all? And I'm sorry if it's funded with government money, even a little bit, it does. Is that who should be teaching your child your religion or your tradition or whatever? Like the problem with all this, as I said before, is it's billed as a solution. Nobody wants to talk about the trade-offs and the fact that they can't directly tie going to a different building of any public or private. They cannot tie going to a different building with better education. Because what I've noticed about the people you're arguing with is not one of them understands what good education is.
Right.
So if you don't start with what is the thing, what's the project we're supposed to be working on here, and what should it be looking like? And then let me explain to you how this is actually it. It's the thing. It will deliver the thing. They're not only not defining what that thing is that you want to be getting, they make it like it's a different choice. Therefore, it's great. It's like Netflix. You just have more channels.
Yes.
When
Well,
has Netflix
literally,
equated to high quality entertainment because I have 100 channels?
Well, and they literally call it high quality instructional materials. So I argued with the legislator who brought forth the bill. And I said, I know it's not going to insult you because I know you didn't write it, but because, you know, the special interests and the policy wonks, they write it.
Right.
But the high quality instructional materials, they're saying, well, who said this is a technology bill? And what makes you say this is where does it say iPads and Chromebooks in this bill? Well, the thing is that they're giving the districts money to print the materials that come from online because they know that if they put them directly online initially, then we were right. Then these grassroots mommies were right. And they don't want that. So now they got to do this whole song and dance, and then they create these manuals. So they're printing all day long these open education resources. And the pushback from the grassroots is now making them change the narrative to where they're saying, okay, well, if we just dangle some Bible stories in there, maybe the mommies will be okay with it. So they're going to Moms for Liberty, and they're going to, Eagle Forum. And I'm thinking Phyllis Schlafly would roll over in her grave if she knew that they were doing this, because she sounded the alarms decades ago about what's called CBE, competency-based education, outcomes-based education. Well, that's exactly what this is. So they, and you were talking about the language that they use, freedom, choice, all these euphemisms and it's the deceptive semantics. It's a marketing scheme, and it's worked because people, I had to get after some of these newly elected people they're great. They're staunch conservatives, patriots, but they're using the language too. Parent empowerment, educational freedom, choice. No, if they haven't read the bills, they cannot, they're wrong about that. If you read the bills, all that language, and we told them, one of the legislators agreed with us. We said, take that out of there. Our rights come from God, not the government. You don't put parental rights and choice and all that in there. And they did it in the party platform. And I'm like, with these propositions that they put on the ballot, well, they set it up where it's deceptive language. So
it really empowers the government. If you read the bills, it says what the government may now do that it wasn't previously allowed to do. It now may set up a little separate agency. It may set up an application process. It may set up a lottery. It may set up all kinds of different ways to disseminate money differently than it does now to different people according to different rules. And if you don't think that that is inherently political, you're not paying you don't understand how anything works, because the reason that our schools are, in my opinion, bad because they're connected to government is that makes education inherently political. If it weren't paid for with your tax dollars, it wouldn't become a political football. If it really were private and you said, I want to go to the school down the street because it teaches things the way I want them taught, and your neighbor wants to go to school on the other side of town because it teaches things the way they taught, there's nobody in a position of power who can either stop you, stop the school, tell the school to do something different. They can't tell you to spend your money differently. They have no role to play. But if you can go to the government and say, don't let my neighbor go to that kind of school because it's my money that they're spending to go to that kind of school, it will happen. It's not a matter of, will it happen? It will happen. It's only a matter of how much and at what time. And when I've heard you speak and I've read what you've written, that's essentially what you're trying to warn people is you're saying, when you remove language that says no strings attached.
Yeah.
And you can make 17 different arguments about, like the one that I heard somebody make where they said, well, if we have that language in there, then that means the person could use the money to get an abortion. They could use the education money to get an abortion. And I'm like, I hate to break it to you, dude. Money's fungible. If the education expense is defrayed from government money and they want to use their pocket money to go get an abortion, you can't stop them. Are you going to now audit every single family for all their expenses to make sure they spent wisely because we're giving them some money for education? No, you're not. So this is a bogus argument. It's unprincipled. Your argument has to be either we believe it's the proper role of government to take money from person A and give it to person B to pay for the choice of education we've approved of, or you don't. And I come from the school of thought that says I don't support socialist entitlement programs, period, even if I benefit from them. Even if it's going to give me a little coinage to go do something or defray private school costs, it's wrong.
Don't take it from me in the first place. Right. And I'm with you. And I know taxation at this day and age is theft. Going back to the point about abortion. So when they brought that up, and I realize your audience is nationwide, it's not just Texas. So I don't want to make this too much about Texas, but what happens here oftentimes, because Texas educates 1/10 of America's kids, it gets scaled nationwide. And what they're planning with that technology bill I mentioned, the Amplify bill, that's going to be scaled nationwide. And we know Margaret Spellings was the education secretary with Bush, and she's in Dallas, but she's gone back to DC working for another think tank. So what's happening here is the messaging is going to DC. And you can see the stuff about the Bible being in 1605, that Amplify bill, is that's making national news as well. And so you've got this purposeful polarization, because those who, don't subscribe to Christianity or Judaism, they're going to be like, the Bible, because that's really not the role of the schools. We're to propose our faith, not impose it. And certainly I do not send my kids to the government school to learn about my faith. Like, they're going to
just flip it around. Ask them how they feel about funding madrasas.
Well, exactly. And they
are already in Michigan. There's federal money that goes to madrasas.
True. Absolutely. And when the money follows the child, it can also follow it into the madrasas, the Wiccan schools, the Scientology, whatever,
the Bill and Melinda Gates School for the Better Humanity. The trans rights
never think about it being something like that. And so then you got a situation where our tax dollars are funding these private religious entities. Never think about that. But on the
Karl Marx Academy of Collective Goodness, I mean,
or Karl Rove, whatever
it is, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't be funded with tax dollars.
But the abortion thing, I think, is so. I mean, now, and I am going to name names on there because I promised my friends I would do that, and these fellow warriors out there. But so that was Scott Bowen and Carrie Cheshire were on two different committees. They're funded by these West Texas oilmen who are in the news a lot in Texas and sometimes beyond. I mean, CNN has done a deal about them. And for Christians, they're thinking, oh, this is just an attack on Christians by calling us Christian nationalists, and that this is because they hate God and they hate Christians. Well, there is some of that, no question. But really, what we're battling, and those who are like, I'm a Christian, and I don't want them to do what they're doing to undermine our constitutional republic. So when they pay these men to infiltrate the party process, the platform, the priorities, the planks, all the P words, the principles are kicked out the door. Those don't matter. So it's money and influence that really runs the show. Well, they weren't expecting all these moms to show up. We had some huge wins. One is, they wanted that language, no strings attached. They wanted that taken out. They want the strings. And so they cited the example, the most extreme example of an abortion. Well, we don't want people funding. Well, the left and those who are against school choice, like in Dallas, the governor had a press conference down in a private school down in South Dallas in the projects. And he's like, the press asked the question, because the press, they say, we want accountability. We want all these things because we don't think that's right that the money goes into your private religious school. Okay, fair enough. They make the argument, but now we're making that same argument. We've got to have accountability. And the governor said, we can't have a homeschooler, just watching TV all day. There has to be accountability measures. And so then he turns to the director of the private school. And he says, what do you do? And she does MAPS testing. Well, that's NWEA MAPS. That is a huge data harvesting company that is tied to the testing. So, I mean, you know about this, but so basically a lot of the pre-testing and the benchmarks that happen before the STAR test, which is our accountability test, that is who they use. And I know that a lot of these private schools are starting to use this, and whatever the test may be, it doesn't matter. It can be the norm reference test, the state test, whatever. If I was homeschooling my child, I would not want the government telling me any mandating anything like that. If I take
Right.
the money, I open myself up to that. And then eventually I won't be able to teach my faith or whatever it is I want, or whatever, lessons I want to teach. They will impose the state curriculum, which they're moving towards with this Amplify Bill 1605.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
it's all connected. It's the same people, but
And remember too, that the argument then becomes, I've heard from people, well, then don't take the money. If you don't want the strings, don't take the money. Except remember, everybody needs to remember something and again, I go back to Obamacare, where they said, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. Don't go in the marketplace. Don't take the subsidy. Don't buy one of the plans. But this is where the fact that it actually is a market, whether you like it or not, whether we can all turn up our noses at the idea of our children being a commodity, but here we are.
yeah.
And so as a consequence, with them, trading access to our children back and forth exactly like their cattle, what will happen is the market for curriculum, whether it's online or not online, the market for gymnastics classes, the market for whatever there is,
Mhm.
if they decide, well, we can't function not accepting these vouchers. We
Yeah.
need to go into that marketplace in order to remain in business, because the majority of Texans have decided they want to use this, because otherwise they're leaving even more money on the table that was taken from them by force. So they're using it. And if I want to be the one studio that doesn't offer dance classes with this, or I want to not make curriculum that's acceptable to Texas voucher standard programs, accountability measures, blah, 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 I won't have enough customers to stay in business. Or conversely, my only customers are going to be the tiny little rich elite or whatever. So you will change the marketplace for what is even available as a homeschooler. So then what ends up happening is, not only do your little mom and pop shops who write curriculum and this and that, and teachers and tutors kind of like dry up and go away and they can't do business anymore, but the government very frequently, when that occurs, says things like, you have to register. You have to tell us in Texas, you don't, but in my state, you have to say I'm homeschooling. You
Mm.
have to tell us anyway. So we're just holding you. It's too much administrative hassle to have two different standards of people taking the money and not taking the money. So, we're going to just send you the money anyway, whether you like it or not. And people who think that's not going to happen, it's already happening with so-called free lunch in the public schools. Talk to people in multiple states. There are dozens of states where parents woke up one day and opened their mail to find effectively an EBT card for food. And they're like, wait, I didn't apply for this. I didn't want this. And it says, you don't need to do anything. It's okay. It was just too much hassle to administer who had it and who didn't. And it's only equitable that everybody get free lunch at school. So everyone's getting free lunch at school.
Wow.
So now the parents who don't want it, they don't want the expense going up, the budget going up, and they want to send their kid with a brown sack lunch. That kid's going to be the only kid in the whole school stigmatized of like, gee, you stupid, you get a brown sack lunch. So all of this is designed to sort of pull us under the same sort of educational umbrella, which is, and I noticed Patrick made a point over here of saying it is in sync with the 2030 agenda.
Yes.
That if you think for a second, now tell me if I'm wrong, because you're knowledgeable on this, but the Republicans pushing school choice bills do not speak out against this. You won't hear them say the 2030 agenda is bad, SDG goals are bad, we're totally against UNESCO, let's pull out of UNESCO. You're not going to hear that.
No.
All this technology, that's what it's for. Am I right? Or am I crazy?
No, you're right. And the biggest drivers of technology in the contracts come from the right.
That's right.
And we're in the power seat. So Pat's right. And he's written a book on the accountability system, the agenda to control knowledge and information. And he set out to prove that the accountability system, No Child Left Behind, was written with the intent to set up schools for failure so they would close them. That creates an automatic percentage of winners and losers.
Right. And this goes back to, I told people the other day on my channel, 1953 is when they met at the UN with even representatives from the United States and lots of other countries, met to talk about the global citizenship project and
Yeah.
having schools start to gradually align across all these different, dimensions and so forth. And we are, it's 5 minutes to midnight, guys. And to think that these bills, that school choice is not suddenly the most important thing on the agenda for Republicans that ever was, right?
That's it. Right. I know. Then
Where's this coming from?
and it's working. And the point that it subjugates the private sector should terrify people. And yes, you can opt out of it. You don't have to opt into it. You can reject it. And I would say the homeschool communities are split. So you have about, half want the money, half don't. Maybe more like 75% don't want the money because they're, free birds too. They don't want any strings, but it really does impact the whole true freedom to educate your kids. Because we don't have to sign any register or anything to say that we're homeschooling. We can just do it, and you don't have to put your kids, there's no compulsory.
And people went to jail to get that right for people in Texas. And, I don't want anyone to forget that. I've had Nikki Truesdell on this channel and she's talked about that. So, having the right to homeschool your own children in the United States of America was not a given in recent memory in my lifetime. People had to fight for that. And what I hate seeing is people, handing it back over and saying, please supervise me just for some government cheese. And let's Lynn talk very specifically now, because we've gone around the issues, and I noticed a couple of people in the comments are like, well, when is Lynn going to get to why it's bad? We've been talking about why it's bad, but let's be very precise. I'll ask you a series of questions, and
why school choice is bad?
Yeah, no. Okay, but let's go down the line. Okay. So number one, what do you mean when you say vendor contracts, and why are they bad? Now I'm asking like I'm 5. All right. So
I get it. Yeah. Okay. So it sets up the education savings accounts set up for new private vendors. Those vendors can collect up to 10%. I believe our Texas mechanism was 5%. It set up 5 vendors according to the top bill that made it. And so with that, so it creates a banking scheme within the education savings accounts that are run through, or that is run through the comptroller. And so that grows government, it grows his office. And then the reporting that you have to do to accept the money, there are hoops that you have to jump through. There's reporting mechanisms, there's receipts, we haven't passed one, so, we don't know for sure, but it is a vendor bill. There are people waiting in the wings, and these certified educational assistance organizations, CEAO, we call them cash cows. That's how we pronounce it, cash cows. But the CEAOs, that's the government. You're growing the government. You're saying the government has the authority to then run this system. And Corey DeAngelis, I want to mention him because he has been affiliated with UNESCO. Of course, they've taken that down. He's the poster child of school choice. He's a paid lobbyist. He should be registered as a lobbyist. I've sat in these testimonies with him in the audience, and all the legislators get their picture with him. They're all like, hey, and this bromance going on with Corey DeAngelis, who is funded by Betsy DeVos and American, the children,
it's like AF,
American Federation for Children, AFC.
Yeah, that's AFC.
And all the billionaire boys who fund that agenda. But so I lost my train of thought, but anyway, the legislators.
I think the point that you're making that people have been missing,
is
it's not just I sent my money to Austin and it like magically reversed itself and came back to my wallet. Like there is a whole administrative thing in the middle that will make that happen.
Yes. And so people like Corey actually could be set up as part of the vendor list. So to people who think that he's doing it out of the goodness of his heart, he doesn't have children. He's on this whole this media thing with his, his press deal with his new book about what the parent movement or something.
Red Fist, the parent revolution,
yeah, and he's got that
with the communist fist and the
yeah, like
people will drop breadcrumbs for you to tell you what they're really about. And you really probably shouldn't ignore them. You probably should pay attention. So it's like, if it looks like a communist fist,
well,
maybe read between the lines.
You could argue that he's mocking their symbols, but it's symbolism nonetheless. And he is an agent. He's an operative. He's a paid agent. So he's not doing it out of the goodness of his heart. He doesn't have children. And he's going to be, maybe, I don't know if he's had the baby or not, but he is a paid operative. They reject.
It is what it is too, Lynn. It is what it is. So we've already stipulated that it is aligned with 2030 standards of getting the public and the private exposed to the same rules and regulations that are targeted towards career and college readiness and global citizenship, and making sure that everybody has these competencies and that we are all online all the time, monitoring everybody's feels and all the things. So, after a while, if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So, you see an R after someone's name, or you see them palling around with conservatives. If they're still selling socialism, they're still selling socialism. It doesn't change the product that they're selling.
No. And I think to the language, I think universal, when we're talking about that semantics and that umbrella that they're trying to, you and I know, like, I think to the point of the title of the show, that it's a carrot to control. So what does that mean? Well, they have to engulf and enslave all. What's the best way to access those who are not inside the system? You have to dangle the money carrot. It's the thing. And when they drive up the cost of living, we'll be begging for these options when parents have no resources to educate their own kids. That's purposeful, and that's where we're heading. And we're talking about the whole agenda 2030 and driving us into these high density cities, and how education is changing, and the whole community schools model. That is, by intent, exactly.
And then there was that. This goes with what you're saying. So this goes.
They're globalists. The Bushes are
this
globalists.
goes way back. As if back when he was accused of setting the schools up to fail, right? So they could privatize them. And again, I would dispute the use of the word privatize, but that's, semantics. But you can see now how their argument holds some water, because the fact of the matter is the schools are failing by parent standards, certainly by objective testing standards and all that, and the capabilities of our students.
Yeah, they are failing, whether they're driven to failure or not. They're failing, and they're not owning up to their own failure.
So the carrot is kind of like, the money. I'd say the money is the green, part that it's a carrot. Like, oh, look, it's sticking out. I know it's a carrot. Pull this up. But the vegetable part, the part that's under there, is that it's nutritious, that it's better, right? That you will have a better education is what I was talking about before. So it's like, look, pull up a carrot. Here it is. And then you go and you bite into the carrot, but it's actually rotten. It's one of those carrots that's in your refrigerator for like 6 months, and it looks normal on the outside. So like, maybe it's still good. And you go bite it, it's like flaccid. Bends over. It's not really a carrot. There's no crunch left to it. Yeah, that's what you're actually going to be getting with this stuff.
Well, and I think two people need to be able to. It helps to have simple bullets for why this, because there are plenty of people who don't. They know it's bad. They know they're against it, but it takes a lot of time to learn how to articulate why it's bad and have the evidence behind it. So I always say, have you read the bills? But like we had in, I think, let's see, House Bill 1 or Senate Bill 1, doesn't really matter, but there was community schools. That was House Bill 1, the big one, the $32 billion one that had communities and schools baked in it. It had incentives for pregnant teens. Like all these things. And, the other thing that some of the legislators who were targeted for not supporting school choice, and they're called rhinos and Democrats and all that. And no question that they have had made other decisions and voted for other things that would constitute, a rhino, Republican in name only. But in on this particular issue, one of the legislators, he told me, he said, first in line is children of illegal immigrants.
That's right.
And he said, I can't vote for that. That's not conservative. That's not what my people send me to Austin to do. I can't do it in good conscience. And you know what? That was a great point. I thought it was an excellent point that they would be eligible. So you come over here illegally, and then we hand you a government stipend, a voucher, a savings account for you to spend it to however you want. I don't think that's right. And when they talk about the surplus, so Texas is a very wealthy state. We have a $33 billion surplus. There's going to be even more this next 89th session. Surplus is just over taxation. People need to understand that we're not just
money isn't growing up out of the ground like oil.
Right. And I've talked about, why don't they pass a clean bill? Like, why don't they propose a clean school choice bill? I'm still not going to support it because of this important reason, but at least it would make more sense if the money never left your property taxes.
That's what I've said. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yes. Like a refund or some sort of tax credit on your property taxes, so that it can't be laundered through the comptroller. It can't grow the TEA. It can't create, these vendor setups, these mechanisms.
And there's no way for the public school to keep getting a percentage of
exactly.
it without having your child in the seat.
Right. And that's the best way to defund. I mean, for people who want to defund the public schools and drain the problems, they don't have the butts in the seats funding. They don't have the physical body of a child in the seat. That hurts their pocketbook the most. That is your best weapon against your school district, is to use your feet and walk, and then figure it out as you go. Whatever that is, you figure out. I mean, Nikki Truesdell says anyone can homeschool. That's unfortunate. My district it's like tough love. I wanted so badly. Back in 2017, I wanted to stop the teacher attrition because ours was the highest in the Metroplex. I saw the wasteful spending, the bond debt, the decline in the reading. I mean, that's going on for a decade. Like they're all ignoring the fact, and the school board's like, happy talk. I mean, and I'm the ass or the jerk. I'm the one who's like, oh, that Lynn Davenport, she's negative Nelly. Well, no, I'm just sounding the alarms. I'm saying, I don't want these teachers to leave. My favorite teachers, when they left, my oldest would have them. And then my second child and my third child would not have that same teacher. The institutional memory that leaves when a great teacher leaves, we can't get that back. They're not training them at the colleges of education, like where I went. They're not doing that now. So they're not coming out of school ready to go. Address the root problems. No, the district doesn't do that. They do Band-Aids, and they change every year. They follow some new trend and some, wasteful vendor, they have brought it all on themselves. And so now I hate to say, like, I told you so. I don't want them to fail. I want our neighborhood schools to succeed so that they give the kids a proper education, so your communities stay intact. I mean, that's what I believe, that we did have a good system. I mean, it took a long time.
Especially in Richardson. I mean, I lived in Dallas for a year, but that was back in the late 90s. And, the schools in the area where you are were renowned. There, Plano, places like that were extremely, good schools.
Yep.
But I maintain, as a former classroom teacher, somebody who does have an ed degree and so forth, that what makes a good school, what makes it good, is the teachers in the classroom. Okay. First and foremost, the quality of the human beings that are actually occupying that building.
Yeah.
And then the amount of autonomy they have to do their job as professionals.
Yeah.
Okay. Because you could have the best teacher on planet Earth in a building and in their classroom, but if they've got administrators coming in and burdening them with all kinds of garbage that is not in their wheelhouse, that isn't something they should be doing, that they know they shouldn't be doing, good people will leave. because they have integrity. They're like, I'm not checking in on their mental health constantly. I'm not a doctor. This is not what I should be doing. I am not going to bully the white kids for the sake of the brown kid. I'm not doing this. So they leave. And then you're left with people who agree with that stuff. Or if they don't agree with it, it's just as bad if they're like, I'll say and do whatever you want and give me those bennies. So now you're left with people who are not high quality people, who are quite literally raising the next generation, because you're spending 8 hours a day, 9 months of the year, raising other people's kids. And without that kind of human to human interaction and role modeling, it all goes to hell. And I don't care how much your property taxes are, how fancy your house is, how nice your city is.
Yeah.
If the individuals in those rooms with those kids are not of the absolute highest caliber and empowered to be as good as they are morally and professionally, it doesn't matter. You could spend $1 million. It won't matter.
Well, and so I worked, I volunteered with the job ministry for 12 years. And so we'd have teachers come through the program, and they'd say, I'll do anything but teach. I will deliver Uber and pizzas and whatever. Right. And then I'll drive Uber. And then I started to see the people who struggled more to find a job, that didn't have the right skills to find a job and needed more help. They'd say, you know what, I think I'm going to go into teaching. And so you're seeing this mass exodus, but they created conditions in our schools, like in Dallas ISD, they had a merit pay system. The same guy who's been appointed to take over Houston ISD is the same guy that came to Dallas in 2014, and he put in this military style leadership and imposed merit pay on the teachers, and it caused 10,100 teachers to leave. That institutional memory you can't get back, not coming back. And teachers with means, or have, spouses who have jobs or they have other options, they got out. And so to your point, then you have these people coming in who may subscribe to those new values that the school is imposing. And then I think they've set up, like, you got libs of TikTok. And I don't even know if any of those things are legit. Like, I sometimes wonder if those are like cybernetic steering mechanisms to create, it's like, is that real? Yeah, it might be real, but it's they're being steered. And so are the people sounding the alarms on that. And then you have okay, now I accept your technology that you're going to, because that's not going to indoctrinate my kids. That's not some scary purple-haired person. Now I can control what they're learning on this playlist on a device, and that's less scary than the human teacher. That's by design. So when I say it's broken on purpose, that is in the accountability system, and then where we're headed with the social emotional learning and all of that, and all of that imposed on the teachers. They don't want it. Most of them don't want it, but the new ones are like, hey, this is how it is. This is how they were educated. A lot of them were educated on Common Core, and they're ding dongs. They're dumbed down to the point where they're like, oh, yeah,
absolutely. They also didn't get any instructional design education in their school. Everything was theory. And then so with Common Core and standards-based education, I've explained this on the channel because a lot of parents are mystified. Maybe they're, my age or something. They grew up and went to school when we didn't have standards-based education. Yeah. So they're accustomed to subject matter expertise. They're accustomed to teachers, your math teacher knew math and your science teacher knew science, whatever. And what we have now is, when you say, I want to see the curriculum, or like, the teacher doesn't know what they're going to be teaching tomorrow until tonight at 10 p.m. when they're online looking at the open resources going, that looks good. I'm supposed to be teaching standard number today. Okay, this looks fine. Or their best friend, what did you teach? What did you use? Yeah, this one's easy. And the kids will shut up and keep you, be occupied for 40 minutes, and you can go be on your phone. No, I'm dead serious. Like, this is what you are
absolutely right. So there are those who that's appealing because they're so unqualified that a scripted lesson would be safer than them going. And that was the pitch of the bill, is that, but that two wrongs don't make a right. So instead of repealing what led us to this point, and instead of technology, you pay the teachers with the money and you train them with the money saved on the technology. They always find the money for the devices, the broadband, the vendors, the apps, all of that, they find the money for it. Even the testing vendors, they'll spend billions on these things that have no fruit. There's no return on the investment. But somehow we've been conditioned to, well, that's just how it is. No, and I'm the type, I'm like, no, it doesn't have to be like that. We don't have to do what they said in No Child Left Behind. We take it to we've got the strongest attorney general in the nation. Why is he not saying this? His wife's a senator and she's pushing school choice. Like the web is it's so deep and so vast.
People like,
I don't know.
People like easy solutions or something that you can easily brand as your rescue. Here's your parachute. This is it. This is the rescue. And I think parents, they're reading the room correctly. And, from a political marketing standpoint, they're reading the room that parents are frustrated. They feel desperate. They're worried about their kids. They're having to work twice as hard just to pay their bills. Taxes are going up, inflation, all these things. And so along comes somebody who says the right things about this is too woke and this is not conservative and this is all they're teaching crazy ideas in the school and they're not learning to read and we need to get back to basics. So they say all the right sort of kitchen table language to get people thinking like, you get me, you get what I'm worried about, you get what I'm upset about. And I'm sorry, that runs across political lines that most parents are like, my kid can't read, what the heck's going on? So they get them, like that, and then say, you should be able to choose. And the only reason you can't is government isn't giving you the money to do it. So they're not getting into what you're talking about. You're talking about actual reform. You're talking about people taking responsibility, both parties, by the way, taking responsibility and saying, yeah, we kind of broke it. And that's why it doesn't work, is because we had control over it. We had control. We designed it. It's broken. We failed.
We did. And they think that feeds the Democrats. I'm like, we're still in power. So shut up and just do it. Like,
it's called doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's called doing the right thing. And you know what? You're a better Republican if you go ahead and say, we screwed up. People are so hungry for that. People are so hungry to hear from people with integrity. That's what they really, really want. And they're underestimating the Texas voter, in my opinion. They're giving them candy, confection. Look here, they'll get cavities, but here it's candy. It's sweet. It solves your problem. And I'd say, like you said, there's a percentage of people who aren't thinking too deeply about it are like, yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, give me money. I want to go to a private school. People in private school have it better. But they're essentially playing into the same things that the left does. Envy and resentment. And that's the language of the left. That's not conservatism. That is not constitutionalism. That is not virtuous. The way you get to a better place in education is you actually represent the values that you claim to represent. And don't throw them out the window because, well, they're doing it too. We might as well, because then you're no better. You're exactly like them. People talk about a uniparty and I'm like, that's what you are.
That's what they are. That's what they do. That's how they act. And you just follow the money, and it's abundantly clear that they're compromised and you have to dance with the one who brought you. So that's what they're doing when they go and have their picture with Corey, and I don't know what their perks are behind the scenes. Like, I don't know what they give them beyond just the political cover and but there's more to it than what we can actually see. And I don't know what all that is, but something smells when they fight this. When Steve Toth fights that hard, a pastor, we worship the same God. And I don't understand how he can be so blind to what I'm saying. And then to mock he went to a tea party in a county where one of my friends is an activist. And he basically went there, got up on stage and mocked her and said, we're trying to turn all your kids into little communists, or, we're trying to make everybody communist through OER. And he's mocking her. And, she's one of those. Here's the frustrating thing. Instead of coming to those of us who have been in the trenches, we literally have kids in the system. We've fought the beast head on, and they don't come to us. They go to the think tanks, the lobbyists, and the special interests, and people like Texas Public Policy Foundation, which is all Bush ed, Jeb ed is what we call it, Bush reforms, which have failed So why would they not go to those who, and it's just like, why wouldn't you go to the teachers who are the seasoned professionals? I'm not talking about raging liberals. I mean, there are teachers who I'm on this private Twitter group of all of these people who are pro public education. They are pro the constitutional republic, pro Texas, pro America. They are staunch conservatives, and they're tired of, some of them are teachers. They're in the system. They don't want this stuff. They don't want any of it. And it
is
awful.
not any of the things that align with what you would call conservative. And it's, 100 miles away from anything, constitutionalist or libertarian or whatever. And the thing I guess I would say is that I think they are that way. Like this pastor you're talking about, like I said, they don't have core principles in which you obviously have. And somebody like Patrick obviously has, where you're like, what's my bottom line? Like, what is the limiting principle here? And it's like the individual liberty and all this stuff of like, what is it that we're actually delivering? And they don't. And so what I think is happening, if I give them the benefit of the doubt, let's say I give the pastor the benefit of the doubt that he is in good faith. Okay.
Yeah. Like
I think he's lacking in principle. And I think he is one of two things. He's either a crazy, like pie in the sky optimist that he believes that when this money starts flowing into these private entities, that people that he agrees with will be able to sufficiently control it and make some kind of amazing, better thing out of it, that all will be well. Okay. So like there's that. Or conversely, he is hardcore pessimist that there's no way we're ever going to fix this. So we might as well play ball with them, and we might as well get our piece of the pie. And that's usually what I see from people is they're doing the, if you can't breed him, let's join him. Or the, no, surely if we have some of the money, we'll make something really awesome out of it. I've heard Corey himself say, well, we have to build a political coalition. And I'm like, do you understand the money's being given out indiscriminately as to everyone's different politics? It's not only going to Republicans. Well, the parents who get this money, as you point out, could be illegal immigrants who are then going to be told, vote this way. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? And I think he's in the camp of, I have a coughing fit. He's in the camp of, we can't fix it. And so therefore he doesn't want to hear the solutions to fix it. And the work is hard, but the solutions really are simple. And I outline those. Like, we look at how we've changed how we educate kids. They talk about returning to classical. They use all of our terms. Like now they're saying, oh yeah, this Amplify will return us to a classical model, which is
if it's total online. By definition, it will not.
Lie. It's a total lie. But that's how they figured out how to just to discredit us and to use our words either against us or co-opt our language. And so that's what it is. They're going to lie, cheat, and steal to get their deals through. I mean, they get rewarded for it, and they do get political cover for it. But we're not stopping. Steady wins the race. Like the thing about what we do is we're not going to appeal to the masses. We may not ever get what we need, but what we do along the way is we educate parents, and once they can draw a circle around their own families and really help their own children and grandchildren and tell others about it, like that, I know that's a huge part of what you do because you know better. And once you know better, you have to say something. You can't just, let people die on the vine. And they'll say, like Ted Cruz says, oh, this school choice is a civil rights issue of our time. No.
I'll be the first one to say, I once upon a time when I hadn't really read the bills and I was just starting out and, kind of analyzing all this stuff, I felt the same way. But I'll be honest with you, I was picturing it as clean bills. So when I first heard of school choice, we're talking years ago, I'd heard about vouchers and Milton Friedman's idea, but in Milton Friedman's defense, because he's dead, he can't stick up for himself now. But in his defense, he even acknowledged the trade-offs and the risks. And when he conceived of the IRAs and 401ks and that whole plan to try to privatize like Social Security, he underestimated the perfidy of the government.
Yeah.
And he underestimated that they were going to tax it. They were going to do all these things. They were going to steal it. They were going to inflate the currency. Like, he kept thinking, he was still in that level of like, surely people won't be that dumb. Yes, they were. So I think if he were to rise from the grave today and look at what voucher programs, what the bills are looking like now, I think he would say, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. And now, upon further reflection, now that I see what they've done to IRAs and 401ks, I'm going to go with no. So I think they're leveraging something without really thinking of the core principles behind what he had advocated. And that's not fair. And it misrepresents what he stood for. So I think, I've supported it when I thought it was going to be an opt-out, when I thought it was going to be a clean bill of like, so you're not going to take my money and I'm going to have the choice of what to do. Right. And then I started seeing like an ESA program, and all this other stuff. And I was like, so it's like UBI, but for education. Ew.
Oh, that just triggers them so hard they can't handle it when you say that.
But that's what it is.
Okay, and I'll speak to this, that with universal basic income, we just had a report from the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, and it says you have to have strings attached if you're going to give this. They went after a program in Houston called Uplift, and that sounds so wonderful.
They always use these, George Carlin did a whole bit on soft language. And
that's the same name as a charter school, major charter school in Texas is Uplift. And so with universal basic income, they said there has to be strings and accountability for it.
Of course.
So then when you say the same thing about universal school choice, and that language is interesting because the big part of the school choice lobby is the Catholic Church, and Catholic means universal. The literal word Catholic means universal. I find that interesting, but they are a major driver. And we met with my friend and I met with the Catholic diocese woman who's in charge of education. And she fully admitted, she came from Tennessee. I do believe they move them around like game boards. Like, we did all this in Tennessee. Now let's put her in Texas. So she's here now in Texas. And she admitted it will drive up the cost of private school if they pass school choice in Texas. Absolutely. They do have the state test. Tennessee homeschoolers, anybody who accepts in private schools, they have to take the state test. Well, that's terrible. The very thing that we're fleeing the government schools on, because that's a huge, when I had kids in school, that was a huge problem. It's educational malpractice.
Because what you test is what you teach.
Yes. It limits.
So you're just going to get taught that garbage.
What gets tested, what gets taught, and that limits everything. And so, I don't have a problem with testing. I think that we do have to have some sort of way to see, are the kids learning, but not what we have with the STAR test and with the, what happened with No Child Left Behind. And so, in Texas, she's like, oh, no, we'll put guardrails around there and we'll make it so where it'll just be a norm reference.
They never say what those are. They give these very high level terms. You're like, can I see it in the bill? Where are the guardrails? And I don't see the guardrails. I'm missing the guardrails.
Right. It's like it's nebulous. And so they do that on purpose because they're like, let's not put too many regulations in there because we don't want to limit ourselves. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's like when they were doing with Enron and all that. And they were like, deregulation. Well, that was so they could build the plane while they were flying it and make the rules to benefit themselves. That's what they're doing in here. Yes. They're like, no, it's not, you women and your noise that you make. Well, yeah, we actually, the devil's in the details, and they're aligning and endorsing bad things. And I thought of another thing that you were saying that reminded me I don't know, I lost it, but
that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, it's an agenda. Yeah. It is an agenda to control. It's just, they're not going to come out and say it. Hey, we want to control you and your kids and we want the money. No, they're not going to say it like that. They have to give it, warm euphemisms and slogans that make you feel empowered and that you have choice and the governments can give you what you need because, you're struggling, and the struggle was set up on purpose to create the situation. It's hard to believe that the devil can work. That's, I think, what people, if you don't believe that there's God and Satan, then it's not going to make sense that this agenda moves through the decades. It started
Mhm.
so long ago, and
Even
it's
even if you don't believe in that, it's a simple truism that, some of the worst things in the world that have ever been done have been done by people with great intentions.
Mhm.
And that, if something is rotten in its core, like the principle behind it is not good, is not virtuous, then all the fruit of that tree is poison. I mean, it's
Yeah.
you just don't get to create something good out of something that was conceived in evil. And with
Mhm.
the public school system, and when I say it, I mean the government compulsory,
Yes.
top-down, centralized system was conceived by racists and xenophobes and control freaks in the progressive era explicitly. They didn't mince words back then, explicitly for the purpose of social engineering. They didn't hide it because they didn't feel back then they had to.
Well, and then
And
on that note, most of us were protected by those things because we had teachers in place who were the guardians,
that's
and
right. We
they
we
weren't
got
gone
properly
yet.
educated in spite of
Mhm.
the intentions of the people running it. So
Right.
what did they do? And then, and Patrick's been sort of highlighting it here and there, is they were sitting there going, okay, where they're still turning out too individualistic. They're still too loyal to that pesky constitution. They're
Yeah.
still not giving us enough power. So what do we do now? You know what we do? And Dewey talked about this. We need to educate the teachers differently. And you
Yes.
have Frere.
Professional development.
Right. And so you have Paulo Freire coming in at the university level, Columbia, and so on. And
Mhm.
all the people who talk about the Red Scare and whatever, like it was paranoia. No, it just happened to have been accurate. That the people who were infiltrating our higher ed back then
Mhm.
actually did want to fundamentally change the United States of America into a different kind of country. And they understood, and Yuri Bezmenov has talked about this, they understood they had to control our schools. And they did so very effectively from the top down. And then the students educated that way went back up the food chain, and it's now like going like this. And so we're
Right.
getting it took a long time. I mean, it took a better part of a century,
Yeah.
but they
Yep.
succeeded. Like Ego Brain says in the comments, they succeeded. And so here we are, and we have to pay the piper. So what are we going to do? You can sit there and deny that that's the actual history of the situation, but the books will tell you otherwise. It is. So
Yeah.
accept it.
It's
And
yeah.
then or you can accept it and move on. And it frustrates me. Does it frustrate you when you see people post, especially people I like, I respect, I care about as humans, when they say things like school choice opponents say, school choice opponents think, and I'm like, no, I don't. No. Yeah. So in other words, there you have the people who are lobbyists who are paid, and we know what their incentive is. But there's
Mhm.
also a huge number of people on the internet in particular who are influential, who talk about us without naming us, right?
Mhm.
People who oppose this scheme. And they almost force me to contradict them, and yet I'm contradicting somebody I like. So there's somebody who I really like. I don't want to name names, but I've worked with them. I think they're brilliant. I think they do so much good. I know their heart is, all in the right place, but I can't let that go. It's like I see it and I'm like, no,
I know. I
no,
can't
I
don't
don't
either.
want what you just said I want. I want the
No.
opposite of that.
Right, and that's the false dilemma fallacy that
So
you
frustrating.
you're backed into this corner that you then have to defend yourself that you're not a Democrat or that you're not, I mean, and I was asked to speak at an AFT rally. Well, they know exactly how I feel about Randy Weingarten. I think she's a monster. The mob boss of AFT
Sure.
National is a lesbian who doesn't have children. Like, what does she know about, you know?
Well, she and Becky are straight up communists.
What?
They're
Share.
straight up communists, and they're the worst kind. They're the kind who want to be millionaires.
Excuse me.
They're like Lenin and they're Lenin and Trotsky basically,
Yeah, and
They're
I'm like,
like
that's who
theirs,
you want
but
your model, like a Hillary type as your
yeah,
model, your leader? No,
yeah,
she's already sold you out to the technology through Education Reimagined. She joined Becky Pringle and all those people.
yeah.
So, but the locals, I'm like, y'all, you could be different. We're Texas. Remember, we're Texas. And you actually, they really don't have the power that keep getting credit for in that, because there isn't collective bargaining. If they had that kind of power, they'd be making the kind of money that the lobbyists are making, and they're not. So I get tired of the same old teacher union, teacher union, teacher union. Okay. Yes, they were wanting to mask our kids. I call them out for all the things, but they invited me to speak because they're finally listening. I'm like, y'all need to start using conservative talking points that benefits you. If you want that money, if you want to be paid for your professional, as a professional teacher, why are you endorsing these apps and these technology vendors and going along with it? You need to be saying what I'm saying, and that is train the teachers. You don't like when the ding dong teacher comes out of college and you've got to deal with them and they're not doing their job right because they're not trained, and your district isn't going to train them and you've got to deal with them. So, and the kids are going to suffer and you don't want that. So why would you not start listening to let's call out the data harvesting, the data mining, the technology vendors, everybody making bank while you're sitting there begging for an increase that doesn't come in below what your increase in insurance is. They keep doing that. The teachers never really, I'm not saying that, look, I don't care if they pay the administrators and the superintendent, six figures or our superintendent $400,000.
They did a good job. I wouldn't care either.
How valuable. That's so valuable. Find the best person, pay them $500,000. I don't care.
I'd rather not be taxpayer dollars, but
but do your job and I can justify it. But when there's no fruit and also, like, why would we flee the government education system for a new government regulated system with school choice? And Corey DeAngelis always talks about fund students, not systems. Right. Literally his plan funds a new system. And so he's full of it. It's all semantics.
All he has is talking points.
Deb, we're winning. If you start looking, we killed it. We killed school choice.
I wish you would come to North Carolina and talk some sense into people here, because we're not winning here. You guys are doing a great job. And, part of why I wanted you to come on here is that I'm going to then go take snippets of this, hopefully push it out to people in North Carolina and be like, here, because we have people here who are fighting so hard for school choice. And even though we have more homeschooling families in North Carolina, I think there's only one state that has more than we do, and it's only by a little bit. But we're getting drowned by the people, especially on the right, the Republicans who are screaming for school choice. And I haven't, I've seen the bill, one of the bills, and
they're all the same.
They're all the same. And we had a Republican director of public instruction who might as well have been Randy Weingarten's cousin. It was ridiculous. The R after her name meant nothing. And so I'm seeing people say, well, that's why what we need is school choice. I'm like, you guys stop.
If only that was a solution, I would support it. It just doesn't. And with the tax credit, what I didn't mention before, I didn't get to the end of what I was saying, is that the problem with the tax credit and the refund is that if you're a homeowner, and the way we have the property taxes set up here, you would get more than an apartment dweller doesn't have the same credit. And so I don't know how you would make that equitable. I think that is an unfair system, that if we're supposedly caring about those trapped and failing schools, well, the bulk of the students in Dallas ISD is 95% minority kids, and there's a lot of poverty in Dallas. I don't know.
That's the problem with the clean bills that offer either a tax credit or, an opt-out or something like that. But I did hear from our libertarian gubernatorial candidate in North Carolina proposed, and he admitted freely, he said, look, I admit that this is still a socialist redistribution approach. He said, but I'm not going to, even if I won, if I win my election, he said, I'm not going to be able to flip a switch and get rid of the constitutional provision in the North Carolina state constitution for providing this and for collecting the money, because it's both in there. He said, but what I do have the authority to do is get, wrapped up an order to say that the money that's brought in at the state level, right? County is another animal entirely, is going to be divvied up exactly evenly. So in other words, however many children on the census, how many school-age children are there in your home? Okay. Really? That's what he proposes. He said, can you think of a more fair way? He said, if we were going to spend $13,000 per kid and run it through all this wasteful nonsense, whatever, where there's also waste and there's also corruption and there's also this.
Yeah.
He said, let them take the literal 13 grand per kid and go. And then I asked him, I had him on the show. I said, well, what do you say to those people who said, we need accountability, we need auditing, we need this? He said, why? And he said, there's going to be fraud and waste. There is. He said, but there's fraud and waste even with government oversight.
That's
a
great.
Look at Medicare. And you have the fraud and waste plus the administrative hassle of auditing and the fraud and waste. He goes, I would rather risk that people are going to spend it going on vacation and doing other stupid stuff and have that, play out, but it's absolutely equitable. And he goes, and then we get busy while that's happening and people are making literal choices with that money. And they could take it to their local neighborhood school if they want and hand it to the teachers union if that's what they want to do. But and then we get busy rewriting the Constitution, reforming the whole system. But he said in the near term, it's the most fair if you want to go there. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I can't really find anything to argue with that.
Yeah. I mean, well, look at COVID. So I've used that as an example. I'm like, I'm not saying it's right, but the money fell from the sky and dropped into people's bank accounts. Nobody asked what they were spending it on.
That's right.
And so we know they can do it with no strings. But they see people miss the point is that we have a globalist governor. He is implementing this because it's whatever his overlords are telling him to do. And so he's really good at posing as a Christian conservative and, staunch conservative that's really defending our border and getting rid of woke, this and that. And, he's a tough guy. No, none of that's true. So if we know he wants strings, and then these people that are trying to run the party, which they didn't succeed, they want strings in there. Why? Well, that's how you access the private and homeschoolers, and you get you dangle the carrot to control. And this goes all the way up to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Education is number 4. School choice is part of the global plan. This isn't just something that's happening in Texas, as you know. It's happening statewide, nationwide. And
but say that to Corey and he'll laugh at you.
What?
I wrote that. I said, don't believe the teachers unions and the UN and anybody who speaks negatively about school choice at the high level. I'm not talking about teachers.
Yeah, no, I mean,
they're actually secretly for it. They're just never going to come out and admit it because it would go, it hurts their fundraising. Like they have to pretend to be against it. The head of the teachers union going way, way, way back to the 70s loved the idea of charters and thought that was going to be a good thing to get unions into, getting union to grow. And we know there have been union movements in a lot of private schools and private school associations. So this is not, it actually ultimately benefits teachers unions, but for the technology piece. So the technology piece threatens everybody. If you're a teacher, whether you're a private school teacher, a public school teacher, or even a homeschooler, that technology reliance eliminates human beings. And that's always, in my opinion, a bad thing when you're talking about educating the young, not to mention the data harvesting and everything else that you talked about. But in terms of the leadership at the tippy top and money and political power and all the other stuff that motivates them, no, they actually like it ideologically because it eliminates the private sector. The private sector becomes part of the public sector, corporatism.
Well, and the public partnerships are a big thing that we battle.
Yeah, that's just a fancy name for fascism.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no transparency. It allows them to cook the books and tap into the public dollars, taxpayer dollars. But I think there's one thing that I've wondered, because vouchers have been proposed in Texas since Bush. So we're going back almost 30 years and they never pass. And sometimes I think that's purposeful to just keep that thing out there, that it does suck all the energy out of the room, the oxygen, and it keeps us polarized. And it also makes for great fundraising, and, it gets everybody ramped up, like with the abortion issue in Texas. So, it's illegal. That's really limited the fundraising opportunities because it's, sort of solved. I mean, there's still issues around it, but It's not totally eradicated, but it was a great campaign tool that people would say, they could disagree on all these issues, but life, that one issue, they're going to get the guaranteed automatic votes because they stand with that one. They can get away with murder over here, but they're pro-life.
Yeah.
And so that's been, that's gone now. So I don't know if
wait till parents find out that, but by taking the school choice dollars, they're going to end up having to go to a school that requires comprehensive sex ed.
Yeah, well, and that's, that is right.
I mean, it's like they'll get you to support school choice by dangling the whole, but what about abortion? We need strings attached. And then it's like, did we mention that one of the strings was mandatory comprehensive sex ed? Did we mention that one of the strings attached is you have to use pronouns? Did we mention that one of the strings attached, and it's not that way now. And people say, well, certainly Governor Abbott would never sign anything that said that. No, he wouldn't. But here's how it works. They say you use from these approved list of resources. The approved list of resources includes technologies like this Amplify thing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Amplify is chock full of this woke garbage.
It is.
And then the teachers who come from all over the country and all over the world, they're not just your local, Betsy from church. And they were educated to go use those resources and handpick them to get all the good little Christian conservatives in Texas to think like they think. And they go into the classroom or they assign it on the little, thing. And here you go, here's your assignment, And next thing you know, your little Sunday school educated child is coming home and talking about their new gender pronouns and all this other stuff. And you're thinking, wait, this can't be. My child goes to private school.
Yeah.
Okay. This is how it works. If you're not going to reform who becomes a teacher and what materials they must use.
Yeah. It's a slow creep. So they're not going to blast you with it overnight. So this passes, it's incrementalism. And why people can't say, that's what happened to our public schools. This stuff didn't happen overnight. It's a slow boil here. And we're,
No. And then I'll say that. And then people will say, well, they can't do that to the homeschoolers because, you're going to be at home. They can't control what you're going to do. And I'm like, okay, super. Here's what they can control. They can control what you're allowed to spend that money on, what they call education, what materials you're supposed to be using and testing on in order to keep getting the money. They can put a provision in place like they did in one other state that says if your child doesn't pass their state test within 2 years, you got to pay back the money. There's all kinds of little provisions they can put in so that you are teaching twice. So let's say you want to do the thing where you're like, all right, I don't want to teach all the garbagey woke stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to provide that out of my own pocket and not bill that back to the government because, not put that on my little list of what I used. And I'm spending time doing that, but then I'm lying. Okay. Because I'm saying I'm doing this other stuff, or I have to show receipts that I bought their crap or spent this many hours. They're going to look, I didn't see your child logged in. You're going to have to jump through all kinds of little hoops to prove that you were sort of compliant with whatever it was to get the money. And you're basically becoming like a scofflaw / criminal, or you just cave and you do it their way and, hope for the best. But it's a lot of effort. It's not free. There's no free lunch.
Mm-mm.
So even in a homeschool setting, or they'll come up with other things like you need a mandatory background check. They're doing that in already in Missouri. Every person over 18 in your household has to have a background check if you're homeschooling. What? Yeah, I mean, that's crazy. Well, this is just a justification to spy on you. And then in Arizona, well, you're not really a homeschooler anymore. If you're taking the money, you're a home-based educator. They have a whole new term for it, but you're not actually a homeschooler. You're a separate classification of person. And what does that mean? So they'll come up with other ways to make sure that homeschoolers are on their radar.
Yeah.
And having to tick off the boxes that the private school and voucher school people and charter school people won't have to do. They'll just be regulated more directly. Same with the curriculum developers and all these other service providers. But don't think for a second there's not going to be a team of taxpayer funded lawyers sitting there.
New market for.
I'm sure they're just going.
Right. And my husband always says, lawyers always win.
Always. And when accountability is code for regulations and laws, right? And oversight, same thing. Investment is spending. Like all these words mean something that other than what it is. The only investment here that matters is the time that humans are going to put into children, other human beings, not a machine.
That's a huge lesson that we really do try and point people back to. What does a classical model look like? And that's books, paper, pencils, great teachers, parents engaging with the child, doing the slow and steady time-tested ways of learning. And we know it works. I mean, that's what helped build this great nation. And the notion that the rising tide lifts all boats and that school choice, where it's been implemented, actually lifts up the public schools. They told us the same lies about recapture and Robin Hood. They told us the same lies about charter schools. They were supposed to lift all boats. And here we are, decades later, things are worse than they were when those reforms were implemented. They don't work. And so it's a lie. And I think, when I was doing that when I gave my testimony at the state convention I have it pinned on my Twitter profile because I go through the strings, and that's basically where that guy Scott Bowen he wasn't listening, and he was the chair of that committee, and he's like, well, what do you mean by strings, or what are the strings? And I'm like, dude, I just went over that. I went over like 10 or so of them, and I tried to make it easy, like A words, so that it's easy for people to remember. And things like accountability measures, accreditation, like how are they going to impose these strings? What are the strings? Because everyone says they don't want strings. So you have to be able to then come back with, well, let's define the strings, because nobody wants strings. And so once you start doing that, then you can really poke holes in their weak arguments. Right. Most people don't give you that time unless they're authentic and they really want to know. Like I have people reach out to me, they really want to know. And then I have people who they know I'm not sometimes smarter than them. I just know more than them about this. And they know I'm going to beat them in the argument. They're not going to be able to debate me. So they don't. Right. And it takes a special person who really wants to know. And if they do, then you know that, and then we can agree to disagree. There are some people who are like, you know what, I still support it. Sorry, fine. But at least you've had a conversation. And most of these people, like Corey DeAngelis, would never debate me. Mandy Drogen, when they have a debate at the Republican women's clubs, I call them red jacket because they all wear red blazers. It's like a costume. And I, I've attended these. I've been members of these. I'm not mocking them. I'm just saying they have they have these speakers that come and they only feed you half the story. And so then they got criticized because they had Mandy Drogen from Texas Public Policy there, the Molly Ringwald of school choice, who cries on cue. And she doesn't have anybody debating her, but the title of the thing is school choice, yay or nay. And I'm like, where's the nay? I'm a nay. I'm a precinct chair. I'm a staunch conservative. Only vote, for conservatives. And so why would you not have me? I'm a member of the club. Why would you not put me up against her, or one of us who is, we're experiencing this? No, they will never do that because there's an agenda. That's when there's an agenda. So who do they pick? They pick a Democrat he wasn't even good at arguing why he's school choice. So, it's not a fair playing field. They never give a fair playing field. So that's why we have to dig deep, and it's our resources. We're not paid to do this. We do it because it's right. We do it because it's important. We do it, and the whole thing is to get people to protect their own kids and grandkids, inform people, and let them know that this is not a conservative principle, policy, none of it. And always follow the money. That's another A.
Well, yeah. And I mean, just remember that names of things don't define what they are. That Black Lives Matter, if you took it at face value, well, of course, who would oppose that?
Who would oppose that?
Who would oppose that? Well, they got real clever by calling it school choice. But remember, the word that's still there is school. And education and school are not synonymous. Doesn't make Lynn or me anti-school. Okay. There are some wonderful schools in the world. Okay. But what we're saying is don't be fooled. I'm sorry.
Should be a place to learn.
Right. Don't be fooled into thinking that school equals education. There's a whole lot of schools out there not doing any educating, but doing a lot of indoctrinating. And so, by calling it that, if you say, well, I'm against that trademarked branded thing, like I'm against the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm against this brand because I know what's behind it. I know it when I pull the curtain back, who's behind it, what it intends to do. And I'm not for that, but that doesn't mean I think that Black lives don't matter. It's the same thing. Of course, I think parents have the ultimate right to decide how their children are educated. I think that is a right given to you by God, nature, whatever you believe in, that is yours by right. And I think the state has no authority whatsoever to get in the way of that. Unfortunately, here we are. The state's been violating our rights for over 100 years in that regard. And so what I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if we really want to solve the problem of improving the education that our children are getting, you've said we have to go after the mothership. We have to go after the source, the root cause of the problem, which is the government itself. It's how they have organized themselves to become this hydra. And it's about them now. It's about the system. It's not about the kids at all.
I do remind the legislators often because they think they have a Christian evangelical in Mike Morath, our TEA commissioner. And, this is the second largest education agency in the nation, I believe. And he's not an educator. He's a technocrat. And that was purposeful. Why would the governor over the state pick a technocrat with no education experience? Well, that's because this is an agenda to control knowledge and information, and they want state longitudinal data systems. They want the children on devices, on competency-based education. The mothership is the government. I have to remind people, Mike Morath is the government. So just because you like him and he's technically our guy because our Republican governor appointed him, right? Why would you give him this enormous amount of power that incrementally he's gained more? He's been in there for 8 years. And okay, so say the state flips to blue and we get Beto in there or somebody. You really want the education commissioner to have that amount of power? It's the government. Why would you grow the government? These bills grow government. They grow the TEA. He only hires from the Austin cesspool and Dallas cesspool. And these are Teach for America. He's restructured the whole agency. Right. No one ever talks about these little woke Democrats that he hires and puts them in these positions.
Well, if you really wanted to dominate a system, and people were starting to push back on that system and say, especially after COVID lies and everything, and say, we've had it. We are done with you telling us how to live and telling us what to do. Yeah. Wouldn't you want to infiltrate or start to co-opt, like the language and the vocabulary, et cetera, of the other side, so you could woo them? That's what the whole point of a Trojan horse is. True. Is to get on the inside of the fort so you can do damage. And if you think for a second that people don't consciously do this on both sides,
they do.
Okay. Of course they do. They do it all the time. And the people and I'm sorry, but people on the left are way more skilled at it than people on the right. Like I haven't heard of a person on the right who has successfully infiltrated the left and gotten them to change anything or do anything different, but you see it all the time the other direction, and they're extremely good at it. There's a lot more money to be made doing that. There's a lot of social clout doing that. And right now, the education is such a hot button issue that you are seeing, and especially in red states, is part of the strategy, is part of the left-leaning strategy, is turn the states purple or blue if you can, using Republicans, not using Democrats. Use the Republicans. It's so obvious. Like once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Bring them further to the center. Yeah, weaken and soften.
Well, and get people begging for the same power, because really ultimately authority housed in government, right?
Yeah. Power and control.
So so I know that you need to get going, but can we finish with one question? And that is, and I get asked this and I'm curious what your answer is. People will say to me, okay, so you're against this school choice thing. So you'd be fine with those bills failing and us just, having what we still have. And I'll tell you my answer, and then I would love to know yours. My answer is, well, of course, I'm not fine with it. I criticize it every day. That said, I would like to contain the cancer. Yes, I would. What I mean by that is that I know this devil. I know where it is. I know how it functions. It's contained within a certain system. I know exactly what needs to be sort of attacked and dismantled and taken apart and addressed. And I would rather harness all that momentum, all the frustration, all the energy, keep the money from spreading and growing. Okay.
Sure.
And I would rather take all of your newfound concern and channel it back into dismantling the system we've got than distracting ourselves and leaving that in place. That's not going to change, and growing the problem into areas I can't even begin to fathom what monstrosity it's going to become. So that's my answer, but I'm curious what yours is.
I'm with you. And that was kind of where I was going with the mothership. So you dismantle the TEA and you get rid of all of those 1,100, 1,500. I don't know how many employees he has now. At one time it was 1,111. That was years ago. And so I know he's grown it since then. And then the bill, House Bill 1605 grew it by 74 employees. So we're getting up in the 1,200. And then the education service centers, which we have, those are like little satellite mechanisms to launder the grants and the technology vendors and all of those contracts through there. They're very difficult to do public information requests. Most people don't know that you can do that, but there's 20 of those across the state. Get rid of those. We don't need them. It's like distribution centers of distribution of bad teaching, professional development. We don't need it. So Marath launders contracts through there. And then the other thing is when you've got these bills, and I make the joke, they call them bills because it's like dollar bills. So these bills have fiscal notes attached to them. If you really want to know what a bill is about, read the fiscal note, and they have all the devil in the details in there and how long it's going to be paid out. And so the bills, you have to, I think you need to repeal them and quit passing bills. I mean, we don't need any more bills. We need to repeal the bad ones. That's what I would do. But then quit focusing on the individual school districts and demonizing them and the teachers. If the mothership, you can't fix it without killing that. Cut the head off the snake
100%.
And reject the federal funds. So this is the federal level, state level, and then you also, that cuts all the funding. I would love to go to this fantasy land, but to go to zero-based budgeting where you have to justify every year, why are we spending this? Is it working? Kill it, and return that money back to the taxpayers. We wouldn't need school choice vouchers and alternatives and the funding if our money never left us in the first place. But the Republicans could do that. We could demand an audit of the TEA. Every education agency, there should be a massive audit, and all of these contracts are public, but we need the political will of the legislators to say, why are we spending this on Safal Partners and Pearson and ETS and Cambiar and AI contracts through these little embedded vendors within these contracts? And where's the data going? Like, who owns that? They're harvesting it. They're selling it. They're commodity. Children are a commodity. And when it's free, you are the product. And that's something that people, we're very vulnerable and very naive, I think, to think.
Right.
They're not doing
well,
that.
I think you nailed it when you said, stop getting distracted by like this individual district and that individual district. The only reason I ever focus on a district like on my channel is more as an example to show how there you are in your good district and oh, look, it's UNESCO. You know what I mean?
Well, I do say, show up locally. I'm not saying like us, the grassroots and the
people. Oh, no. I mean,
yes, sure, show up. I'm talking about like, these people who are like painting a broad brush on attacking the districts, and then they're not going after like the most obvious, and then they keep funding it. Like the same legislators who go after the school district keep growing the agency. It's Republicans. It's not Democrats. They don't have the power. They can't get a bill passed without Republicans.
And I'm also glad you mentioned the books too, because, that's another thing I get accused of. Oh, so you like having the porn in libraries? I'm like, how many different ways do I have to make shows saying it's not a book ban? It's not a book ban. But while at the same time saying, okay, guys, it's been over a year. And I think we need to talk about something else because they're just going to keep publishing more of the schlock and getting, you can get one book out and 5 more come in. This is,
they don't want books. There are no books, there are no libraries. They don't want books.
Well, not only that, the kids can't read. The problem is the kids can't read. It's not, I don't want those books in the library any more than anybody else does. But this notion that our kids are gobbling up this literature, it's there for the purpose of taking grassroots people and distracting us and making us pour our money into the bottomless pit of this thing. Okay, it's like an op almost. And while we're busy reading filth in front of the school board meeting cameras, they're busy behind closed doors figuring out how to get Amplify into every school, or how to get, Castle and Panorama Ed and all these other things, which is a far greater danger to our kids.
You nailed it. And I think it's because that's something like they know how to check out a book. They know how to read a book. And they're like, I can do this. I can go there. And it's the virtue signaling that happens. Right. And again, I'm not saying go get that dirty book and check it out and throw it out. It takes a whole lot longer for them to reorder and figure out that it's not there, right? So you can, that's a wrench in the gear that you can put in there, but they don't want books in the technocratic future. In the metaverse, there are no books.
That's right. They don't care.
That'll work itself out.
Yeah, somebody posted today, for anybody watching that thinks, this sounds a little tinfoil hatty, et cetera. Look, just today, one of the people I follow posted about a book written for teachers. I mean, it's literally theory, educational theory, talking about how it is legitimate to have children be illiterate to further the goals of communism. It's in a book. I need to go get it on the thing on X and somehow put it into my my little community section on YouTube so people can look. But that is actually written down. That by any means necessary means by any means necessary. And if you if you have children who are able to read before first grade, that for a certain percentage of children, they didn't learn to read because somebody sat and taught them how to read. Now there's a percentage who did.
Right.
But it takes effort. It really actually takes effort to make our kids this ignorant. Mm-hmm. Kids are very curious little creatures. Don't underestimate them. They know a lot about what they're interested in. So they have to, the schools have to get in their way to have them not know as much as they don't know.
And that's a great point, because the deliberate dumbing down, I mean, these little change agents and my superintendent, who is all for all the things, I mean, she's part of the problem. And I mean, she endorses everything that's an experiment. She says yes to. And if you give if they dangle the money, the school districts will do anything for money.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Well, I know you have to run, and I'm so grateful to you. I hope, to those who came, I hope this has helped you understand a little better why people like me and people like Lynn oppose school choice, and that we are not, hateful, horrible people who want kids to be trapped in their failing schools. We don't want schools to fail. We would like the government, the state that's running them, to stop being the ones running them. We'd like local towns, cities, parents, local school boards. We would much prefer it to be done that way. We would really like teachers to be teachers again, and professional teachers at that. We don't want machines teaching our kids. We don't want technology harvesting their data and treating them like little products to be programmed for consumer, purposes, or, to slot them into their proper position in the matrix someday of some career that somebody decides they should have. We don't want that. We want them to live full, rich lives of their own choosing, right? And that's all we want. So we just have serious concerns. And I would encourage you all to follow Lynn on Twitter. Are you at Lynn Davenport? How do they find you?
There's an S in the middle. Lynn S. Davenport.
Okay.
And familiesengaged.org is the organization that I am helping with on all the education research. We have a lot of resources on there, and people say that all we do is gripe about this and that, and there's no solutions. We always provide solutions. It's just people, if they don't want to hear that, they're not going to hear that that's a solution.
Well, as
you've solution, they're not going to hear it. But
what you've said is very true, and I think it's a great place to finish. You've said that the solutions are hard work, but they're simple.
They're so simple.
They're not complicated, guys.
Really
School choice is complicated.
Yeah, it's so complicated. You're exactly right. That's why the bills are 100 something pages long. It's complicated, right?
Right.
No,
Exactly.
I'm all for simple. I'm simple girl.
Yeah, but it does take hard work. And I mean, if you're in Texas, you're no stranger to hard work. Come on, you guys, be Texans.
Right, right.
Anyway, so
Maybe
I'm
we
so
should come and
grateful.
teach it. That's our little slogan.
Well, that
Come
is
and
the
teach
problem.
it.
You do. So start at home and push back. But I'm so grateful. I hope we'll talk again as things go on. Those of you who are interested in school choice in general and my opposition to it personally, I have a playlist about school choice into which this will be fed as well. So you can go look at other content I've made about it. But educate yourself. Like any other choice, and certainly when you're voting that you would make sure you really understand what you're asking for. Make
Mhm.
sure you really understand, I don't care how much somebody seems like your guy or your girl, it's your children that matter here. So,
Yeah.
all right. Thank you
Amen.
so much. And please like, share, and subscribe as always. And we'll see you again next time.
Thanks, Deb. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Bye.